Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of Midierror Meets, the monthly music podcast where we talk to a wide range of people from the music industry. This month I'm speaking to Kenny Young, composer, sound designer and audio director for some of the biggest computer games of recent history. I caught up with Kenny earlier on this year to talk about how he approaches the audio in his computer games, whether virtual reality is going to change the way we perceive and implement audio, and whether adaptive music and interactive scores are the way forward for computer games. So let's check it out. Can you tell me your first memories of music?
The earliest memory has to be learning the piano, which I must have been about 4. And I don't play the piano now, so that like crashed and burned. I got lessons from my next door neighbour for about a year, Auntie Duncan. Went to Auntie Duncan's house, and my mum set me off with some freshly made bread, so we were paying her in bread.
Good deal. That sounds like a good deal.
Good for her. And the thing is, Auntie Duncan was an amazing baker, so I don't know if she ate my mum's bread or binned it. It was good bread. But Auntie Duncan was like different class level. So that's my earliest memory. But the one that I was thinking of first was so I had piano lessons for a year, and then my neighbour was worried that she might be teaching me bad habits because she was a pianist, but she wasn't actually a teacher. Mm-hmm. And she thought, I don't want to teach him anymore because I might be teaching him bad habits. So that stopped, and I guess the idea was that I would pick up the piano lessons again with a teacher, but maybe my parents, maybe just life happened, I don't know, but like that just stopped. And then when I was at primary 1 or 2 at school, we did this slightly mad production of Peter and the Wolf, which was like the Prokofiev music, but with the primary school kids in my class acting it out, the story, live to like a recording of the music. And then the thing that was mad was to the side of the stage where, because I wasn't the wolf, I wasn't the granddad, I wasn't Peter. No. I was in a little fake orchestra that was miming off the stage, and our teacher, Mrs. Nash, Avril Nash, asked us to bring in a musical instrument, if you had one, to mime. And we had on the wall of our house a violin that my gran had been given for nursing a couple of, this is a story, spinster sisters when they were dying, and my gran had sort of nursed them. Wow. And the family had said, so this would be in Glasgow in the middle 20th century, and the family, when my gran had done her job, they said, is there anything you want from their house as a thank you for doing this? And she said, oh, I'll take that violin, that's an old fiddle that's sitting on the wall. And so that was sitting on the wall of our house because my dad had it. Just a bit of obviously that wasn't working, it had like one string on it, but I took that in and I was miming away, sawing away to Peter and the Wolf, this thing. And so I came back from that experience, said to my parents, I think I'd quite like to play the violin. That was great fun.
The music coming out of a PA system. I'm pretty good at the
violin.
Good.
I sound great. And of course the violin's one of the hardest instruments to learn. So, but my parents were really supportive. Both my parents were musical. My dad was like a really keen amateur musician when he was like everyone, probably part of the folk revival in the 60s and 70s. He played like on an album in a Gaelic folk group called the Heilerich, which means the Exiles, which is quite rock and roll.
It's folk
rock and roll, but pretty hardcore folk singing Gaelic folk songs. And so he was really keen that I sort of be a musician, and particularly in terms of Scottish traditional music. And so he was totally into the idea of me wanting to learn the violin, because he was just like, great, my son could be a fiddler. And so I got violin lessons from the age of 6 or 7 up until I was 21, actually. So that was a really quite privileged, musical education to have, and that's really my musical background. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we both studied music tech at university, which I thought was quite interesting. And you went on to do sound design for Moving Image, is that right?
That's right. So basically, I was choosing between software engineering, computer science degrees, and then I had this music technology course at Edinburgh. And that seemed attractive because it was like half music, half technology, which sounds stupid, but like as someone who was a bit of a nerd, it felt like that was allowing me to carry on and keep a lot of my musical background, even though I felt like I was sort of moving away from it, but also combine it with other aspects of stuff I was into. So that's really why I did it. And in many respects, I think if I had just had a magic wand, I probably would have quite happily done a much more vocational course that was basically just messing about recording stuff. I think that's what I would have liked to have done. But Edinburgh being an old uni, it was a bit more academic, so I was doing music stuff. So doing harmony and counterpoint, which is like traditional composition studies, which I really struggled with because I didn't. Tragically, the Scottish high school education system isn't really. It's not as advanced as the English A level. So it meant going to university on doing a more traditional music degree that I actually really struggled because I didn't have. There was some big holes in my learning which everyone else had.
In music theory.
Yeah. So, just for example, I think for the A-level music, maybe that's changed now, but it meant that there was this weird bias where Scottish kids were less likely to be accepted to somewhere like Edinburgh. So it's a Scottish university with a bias against Scottish students just because the national curriculum wasn't as good as the English one. What I got from the course at Edinburgh was I discovered sort of working creatively with sound, because up to that point I wasn't conscious of sound. I was aware of music, and the sound thing was just like something that I guess, like most people, you take for granted. So it got me interested in working with sound creatively. But when I finished, or coming towards finishing that, I knew that I had sort of identified working in games, but I knew just from the research I'd done, and this is like 2002, so there was the internet was around, but there wasn't many game audio resources in the way that there's an abundance of stuff now. And I just got the sense that I was not hireable because I didn't have a demo reel, and even back then it was really clear you needed a demo reel to get hired. I didn't have one because I hadn't actually done any sound to picture work. So I'd done quite a lot. I've done stuff like electroacoustic music composition. I'd done some soundscapes, and I was really into it, really enjoyed it. That's why I knew I wanted to sort of pursue that, but I didn't feel like that would necessarily get me hired. So that's why I went to do a master's degree. It wasn't for the qualification, because it's just a bit of paper. It was to get some experience working on sound, because there was no computer games courses for audio at that point, and I don't think there were many computer game focus things for design or even programming at that
maybe
point.
One or
That's
two
all come. Because
we're a similar age. I'm 35 next year, so I'm only a couple of years.
You'll remember all that as well.
Yeah.
From back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But because games were sort of still in that weird place where there were still quite a lot of gamers, but they weren't part of mainstream culture in the way that they are getting there now. It was still considered to be like a weird hobby.
Yeah, even when
it was just on
the PS1 became
started
cool,
to break the back
it?
of that.
It became cool, but it still wasn't like.
So that would be early.
PlayStation
2 must have come out 2003, something like that. So it's around about that point where it was just starting to become more and more mainstream, but not enough that universities have seen the bums on seats opportunities that they have since. So I couldn't study game audio. I probably would have if I had that choice. So I studied sound for the moving image, which is basically film sound, and that was down in Bournemouth, and that was a great course. And the main thing I got out of that was probably more of an interest in the conceptual side of sound. So really just thinking about not so much the sort of the hands-on sound editing side of things, but more just thinking about the sound world and the film world and the characters and how the sound can back that up in a way that traditionally you think of music as being the primary emotional signifier for the soundtrack, but thinking about how sound and really what films and people mean by sound design is that sort of more emotional use of sound from first person perspective, which allows you to do sort of psychological stuff that sort of represents what characters are feeling and all those kinds of things, and so that's what I got from that course. And I think that's something which certainly at the point I got into games wasn't really part of people's thinking about game audio.
I think there's an interview or something that you wrote, which I read, where you said that it's a bit of a difficult. The tragedy of good audio is that it goes when it's done well, it goes unnoticed. And it's such a valid point, that isn't it?
Which is kind of how it should be. And I think there's a lot of. It's interesting. It's like there's a lot. This is like the two things that pull at each other in terms of what I do. Is that what makes what I do really attractive in so many ways. And I'll have to sort of explain that. Is that people, like I said, until I studied my degree in music technology, which introduced me to just even the concept of sound as this thing. I wasn't aware of it, and that's how most people live throughout the rest of their lives. They're just not aware of sound, and they're aware of the impact that it has on you constantly, moment to moment, in all these different ways, conscious and subconscious. And because of that phenomenon where people aren't aware of it, there's a bunch of benefits there. For example, the autonomy you get as a sound designer is huge, because no one's really telling you how to do your job, because they can't, because they're not thinking about your job. So obviously someone who is a professional designer will hopefully start to think about sound, and I mean like a non-sound designer, and like a game designer, they'll start to think about sound a bit, in the sense that they'll be aware that sound can do certain things. Someone identifies, when they've got that feeling that that was a bit shit, that's not disputable.
Yeah,
you
can't, gut
yeah,
reaction.
Like if you didn't enjoy it,
yeah,
you didn't enjoy it. And it doesn't matter if I disagree with your, like, when you said you need to change this. Like, there's this scenarios that have come up where I've had really specific feedback that says, you need to change that thing. And I thought about it, and I've realised that the audio is not actually the problem. It's like an aspect of the way when you use it. So then maybe there's a repetitive sound. Repetitive sound can be really annoying. Why are we hearing that sound so much? Yeah, that's annoying. Is changing the sound the right thing to do, or is actually changing it so we don't hear that sound so much?
Yeah,
and
so
that's not an audio problem.
So
yeah, that's actually a game design issue.
Yeah,
and so
I think you're right about how important the music and the audio is. Because I can't remember where I read, but I think we hear over 10 octaves of sound, and visually we can see 2 octaves of colour.
Yeah.
So therefore the depth of the sound and the audio is really, really important. I think it's a similar thing with like architecture. When people are building these wonderful, great buildings, they don't maybe think about the acoustics of it too much.
Yeah.
So they end up, if they do build this wonderful
huge space
atrium,
with marble.
yeah, and then oh god, no one can hear each other talking in there. It's always like a secondary thought. Whereas, I think for you and for me, audio is very, very important, and it's a very powerful thing. So it needs to be.
That's what we're talking about, was how powerful it is. And what's interesting then is, like, the work you're doing is still having an impact on what they are perceiving, but they don't perceive it as coming from what you've done. And so I can think of things like, I changed a game I worked on years ago, where it was a bit of a murder simulator driving shooting game, and I changed I redid the combat sounds. So like when you were hitting someone over the head with a baseball bat, it sounded a lot more, I guess, impressive. It was basically just louder.
Yeah.
Change of sounds, they were louder, had more impact. And an email went out to the team. It was like, but they went to the animators like, "What have you done? This is great." All the animators are much more like snappy and woo. And he's like, "I've not done anything." And I was like, "Yeah, I've changed all the sounds." And it's that's a really good example of how sound impacts on your perception, but you're not aware of it doing its thing.
Definitely.
So whenever you get those like A/B, it's quite rare to get those kind of big juxtaposition A/B tests in audio. In real life, because normally things change iteratively, so you don't get that sense of a change. But if you got that kind of example where I'd worked on something and then just done a big check-in where it completely changes it, but hadn't told anybody, maybe because I was worried about people like they might not like what I've done, so I'll just change it. And if no one notices, then great. But they did notice; they just didn't notice it was the audio. And I think that happens a lot. But where it gets tricky is audio does. We talk about it affecting you through the back door of the mind. So the ears being that back door. You're not aware that it's having this impact on it goes as far, through things like the McGurk effect, that what you hear actually literally changes what you see. Like the way your perception works in your brain, what you hear changes what you see. And because you have to understand what you're seeing isn't real. You're perceiving it. So it's not, although everything feels concrete and real to us, it's actually just your perception of it, and what you hear changes what you see, which is kind of mad.
That is mad, isn't it?
But
the fusion of those two things together.
Yeah, it's absolutely demonstrable. So it's like, and so that's our little insight we can get into the fact that is happening, and we don't really know to what extent that happens. How what we hear affects our emotions, how our emotions affect what we perceive, all the rest of it. So it's clearly this really complex model.
You left university having done your masters and went to work for Sony.
Yep.
in London, Sony Studio. How did that place compare to Media Molecule?
Oh, it's totally different. I mean, you can't. Media Molecule's kind of different from most places. Just like I mentioned, it's got this sort of meritocracy where, well, when I joined, it was like 15 people, something like that.
Wow,
there was only
that's a really
20
small
something
team.
people shipped Little Big Planet. It was really small team, small company. The audio experience in Little Big Planet and the Terry games were just, they were just what I designed them to be, basically.
And they were incredible.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
I remember playing Little Big Planet on my sister's PS3 and just being like, wow, everything about this game is brilliant. From Stephen Fry talking you through the beginning bit to, the sounds, I think, were something that captured me. The theme tune was just so iconic. It just fitted so well with that game.
The next game they'll ship it'll blow your mind when you see it, because I think certainly they've been creating a lot of original audio technology, so it's if you're into music technology, which you obviously are, then you'll love it, because on that side of things it's absolutely amazing, because it's user-generated content on crack.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's
awesome.
so it's not Little Big Planet, but it's Dreams is sort of taking that all to the next level.
The game that you've just worked on, Tethered.
Yes, I mean, in many respects, Tethered's a super simple strategy game, but because it's in VR, and for anyone who hasn't done VR, it is quite a profound, different kind of experience to all of a sudden, because you're basically transported to another world, because you're looking out of your own eyes and hearing with your own ears at another space, effectively, and that's what VR is. It's literally virtual reality. And I think that is one of those things that you talk about it, that doesn't mean anything, but imagine if you were transported to the surface of Mars. That would obviously be quite a full-on experience. That's what VR gives you. That
imagine you had a hat you could put on that puts you on Mars.
It reminds me a little bit of that show Nightmare when we were kids, where they have like you have to. It's actually nothing like that, because you put on a helmet, then you can't see anything.
And you can't see it, you can just see the floor.
So it's nothing like that, it's the opposite. You put the hat on and you can see the other world. And so even though Tethered's a really simple strategy game, which I think, so now if you can play it without VR, they changed that, because the sales in VR are challenging, because there's not a huge market for it at the moment, because there's not enough people have the hardware to be able to sell enough units to be profitable. So a lot of the stuff that's built is either really small scale and experimental, or it's got funding from the platform holders, Oculus, who are Facebook, or Sony with their PSVR, etc., etc.
It is sort of a bit life changing when you do it. It's pretty profound.
It really is, yeah. And all I can hope is that anyone hears that thinks, nah, just check it out. I just hope the first thing they check out is something that is actually profound, rather than just like stupid.
Yeah, there's a Square Pusher video that just made me feel so ill.
I bet. I mean, Square Pusher's music can have that effect on you if you don't like it.
It was too colourful. There's
too much going on
happening. It was really nauseating. But there's some great stuff, some great VR stuff that makes you, when you take the helmet off or when you take the headset off, you want to just check the real world.
Yeah, reality feels less real.
It does.
Yeah,
it's really strange.
It's really
so
weird.
Engrossing.
Yeah.
And how does that affect the audio side? Like, how does writing for VR differ from like 2D stuff?
In a way, I don't view it that differently, which is sort of what's the word? When you're not allowed to say something sacrilegious, is that the word? No,
yeah,
something.
No.
It's a better word. It's a better word. It's basically, apparently VR audio is like profoundly different, and like everyone can get their head around it. And because I view the game sort of the process of creating the player experience in a more sort of systemic way, where you look at the project and the project informs, which is obviously what people do, but as a result of having that way of thinking about projects, it meant that working on a VR game, I didn't find it that different, to be honest. There was new technology there that I had to get the head around, but really, if you're starting with a player experience and thinking, okay, what is it that this does that's different from everything else I've worked on that I need to focus on, then that's the process I would go through on a game anyway. So I didn't find VR to be that different. What I did find is there's a much stronger attention to detail required. That was probably the main thing I was conscious of, is that because the world feels much more real to you, you just have to make sure that you're meeting players' expectations. And because people, it feels more real to people, they're comparing this experience to the real world subconsciously. They're basically, when they move around, they want what they're hearing and seeing to do what they'd expect. Because if it doesn't, that's what motion sickness causes. Motion sickness. It's like that lack of continuity between your expectation and what you're perceiving. It makes you go. Apparently, what's happening is a bit like travel sickness. Your body perceives that as you are hallucinating, and
Really?
that's why it makes you sick. It's trying to get the toxin out of your system.
Right.
So when if you
incredible.
get travel sickness, it's because your visuals aren't matching, because you're traveling at you don't feel like you're traveling at a speed, but your visuals are telling you that you are. Your body, people get travel sick, your body thinks you're tripping.
I see, right. So
Which makes sense when you sort of...
It totally makes sense.
And so,
Absolutely
yeah, it's the same
makes
with VR. If you know, I could talk about the technology all day, but basically...
No, I'm
So I
well
think
into it.
that's on the sound side of things, that's the job, is to meet the player's expectations. VR from a technology first perspective, and that's wrong. You need to approach it from the experience first and then think about how the technology fits that.
Yeah.
And that's the right way to do it, because if you just go in thinking technology, you'll end up using technology you might not even need, or
maybe overcomplicating
it. Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of game audio people are quite technical because it's a tech driven field. Games are tech driven. That sort of through Darwinian pressures means people working game audio are quite tech-centric already, and that's one of the reasons why VR audio is so attractive to a lot of game audio people, is because they're quite techy and this is new tech, so it's like, well, hey, and that's fine, but that might be interesting. And I think for the initial wave of VR, it's fine to do stuff that's interesting to nerds, but ultimately you've got to create compelling experiences, and whilst the technology enables that, it's the people who are making the experiences that create those experiences, and so they need to be experience-centric, not technology-centric.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a fine line. I think in general, I would say that most game audio people are tech-centric rather than experience-centric, which is why it's one of the things holding game audio back from becoming more the better version of itself, is that people could do with being a bit more focused on the experience than on the tech, because you need both.
I think that's
you
true.
Need both.
I think that's true for music as well. You know, you made me think about. I think there are a lot of people making music nowadays. They're tech centric. They're focusing on what the technology can do for their music, rather than what people would like to hear or would work. Yeah, definitely. There's a heavy focus on the technology side that maybe is slightly unnecessary.
I think. I mean, it depends what you think music's for. Like if it's for you to be able to earn a living from pursuing that, then it doesn't matter what your approach is if you're earning that living, because then you're paying your bills. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, if doing something tech-centric and there's an audience for it, fine. So something I've been thinking about recently is that what I've sort of come to embrace is that I've got quite poppy, like, tendencies, and I think for a long time I've been trying not to do that because I felt like that's not cool.
I know exactly what you mean.
But what I've realised is, maybe just because I'm getting older, it's like I don't give a shit anymore. It's like, if that's what I'm into, as long as you're not doing it for, I think if you're doing it for commercial reasons, then that is where the dirty feeling comes from, right? It's like, I'm doing this because I want people to buy it, and I think this is populist, so therefore it's a bigger audience, and that's not where my mind is. So I've sort of realised that it's fine for me to write stuff that is actually what most people consider to be quite cheesy, as long as that's what I like. And I think that's the main thing. I think you've got to feel like what you're making is that you're happy with it, irrespective of the audience or the money or whatever.
I think making pop in what you do is a valid thing, because, you know, billions of people have heard your music. I mean, how many times have people heard the music you've made?
In terms of like track plays.
Track play. You know, it's popular. You know,
there's no escaping from it.
And that must be a great feeling to know.
And the thing is, it's hard to achieve, because like I don't know if I'll ever work on anything that was as big as Little Big Planet, just in terms of what are the chances. Like, it'd be great. I'm not saying I don't want to work on something as successful as that, but yeah, the first game was bought by like millions. I don't know, like 6 million. And then there's all the people that bought it second hand. Then there's all the people that were playing it on their friends' couches that hadn't bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's, I think, all the people that downloaded it for free when as part of the apology package for when PlayStation Network got hacked.
Oh, right, was it? Oh,
yeah.
great, yeah.
And so, you know, in terms of people that have played the game, it must be over 10 million. I'm sure it's a multiple of that. And then there's a number of times people have played the game once they own it. And it is mad. But
and wasn't there an element to Little Big Planet where people could make that, or no, Little Big Planet 2?
Yeah, we added the music sequence for
LBP2. Which
which was super primitive. Like, it wasn't complex. I mean, we literally developed that in a matter of weeks. So it was like I had to threaten to quit to get it, because like the audio experience in Little Big Planet 2 was otherwise just going to be more of the same. Aesthetically, it was slightly different, but there wasn't going to be any new features, and it was like, that's a bit rubbish. Can we not add something? And so the music sequence was solving the problem that we had millions of levels being created in Little Big Planet 1, but like, you know, there was a limited, like, less than 50 music tracks if you bought all the DLC or whatever.
I was reading that thing that you wrote today
which
about
is statistically,
it, yeah.
that means the music's all the same.
Yeah, for 3 million levels.
Yeah, which is just like nuts. And but it's not like we didn't see that as being a problem designing it. We just didn't think for a second it would be as successful as it was. So we have painted ourselves in that corner. So that's why the music sequence was really important in LBP2, as simple as it was, and it sounded terrible, etc., etc., etc. And that's one of the things that Media Molecule are sort of looking at now, and the Dreams project. And I worked in Dreams for 4 years, so I was sort of responsible for the high level direction in that. So that's why I know that it's batshit crazy what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And how do you, because you talk about sort of making poppy music, and obviously people hear the music over and over. What do you do with your music to maintain that level of interest, that it doesn't get annoying, or what details do you put in?
Other than using interactive stuff, it's tricky. You certainly don't want a track that's any less than 3 minutes. Like, that's like a magic number. Ideally,
I find that is a magic
4
number.
to 6 is like, if it's going to be something people are going to be hearing more than once, you want to be in that 4 to 6 range. And then I think you could probably get away with someone hearing it 3 times before they start to go 3 minutes is good, but I think once you go over twice, you're into danger territory.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because like the 7-inch vinyl, when they made the pop singles, they could only fit roughly 3 minutes of audio on there.
Yeah. So there's that, and then because of the repetition in a game looping, a game track looping, it's to do with your kind of short-term memory. So if hearing it twice is fine, but hearing it 3 times is wrong, that's telling you something about the fact that you're having that feeling of, oh, I've just heard that. Also, I've heard that several times, and this isn't fresh anymore. Whereas if the track's 4 to 6 minutes, I think you buy a little bit more leeway with the number of times you can hear that track. So you can, because that's like at 6 minutes, the end of the third loop is 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas the end of the third loop on 3 minutes is only 9 minutes, which is half
that time.
So like the ratios there are interesting, but like, so it just depends. And obviously, there's no point talking about that in abstraction, because how long is the player in that level for? Does the game even have a level? Because some games are open world, they don't have levels. They've just got more systems. So you might hear music when you're in combat, versus you might hear music when you're near a particular geographical location. And then you've got the relationship between those things, what happens when you're in the combat in that location. So those open world games, the interactive music systems are generally a lot more complex than anything I've had to work on to date, to be honest. So I'm not like Mr. knows what, I'm not like Inon Zur, who's like worked on, like Fallout games, etc., who I'm sure has to contend with all those kind of problems. Although at that point, that's a collaboration with the dev team, because they're kind of having to make the technology that dictates how the music will behave.
Confused, but I think you did do something with Tethered, where you have what are the things called?
Oh right, the music stingers.
Yeah, that's it. The music stingers and beat boundaries. Because what that reminded me of a lot was playing Monkey Island 2. I remember when you sort of like you explained there, you go from one zone to another.
But that was the iMusic system. So that originally that music was that was all note based. So we'd call it MIDI. I mean, it wasn't MIDI. It was note based, but it was for the purpose of the conversation, it was MIDI, right?
Yeah.
Because it was note data, which was triggering the FM synth in your sound card. At that point in the 90s, it would have been a little sound blaster card. And so because it was note data based, and it was being triggered in real time, it meant they could do clever things to transition from one piece of music to another.
Right, I see.
So they probably actually just wrote the transitions for that, but then you could do stuff like trigger the transition on the bar and do things like I don't actually know how the iMuse system works. I'm not sure if it was algorithmically working out how to go from one chord to another, or whether they had just had to write a bunch of different transitions to do that. But
I think it even did like tempo. There was definitely tempo changes.
Yeah, tempo
as well.
changes. And you can do that when you've got a real time a database system, because you're triggering it real time. So you just adjust the data is basically how you can do that. In Tethered, it was a bit of a hybrid thing, because the underlying bed music was streamed and fixed, and it was I wrote it all at the same BPM. It was all at 60 BPM to allow me to then write stingers that were all at 60 BPM. But of course, the problem you've got about playing music on top of music is that they can clash, because harmonically they might not be the same.
Yeah.
Even if they're the same scale, you can still get some stuff that's like, it doesn't feel very nice. So we created a system to update the stingers. So if the chord and the bed track underneath changes, the stingers chord progression will effectively just change in real time to match that. With something like Wise is you can play a stinger to match the underlying chord, but you've got to manually specify what that stinger would be for every chord change in the music, and that's painful.
That's a lot, yeah.
And also, it doesn't have the ability to update so if a stinger is 4 bars long, the Wise, so it's a bit confusing to just talk about Wise, to explain what it is for people who are listening. This is off-the-shelf game audio technology that people tend to license that in a project and use it for games.
Cool. And you said that's a visual scripting language. Is it like Reactor? Does it look
so the thing I made the stuff in Tethered for, that was using Unreal. So confusingly, Unreal is middleware, but it's not audio middleware. It's an entire game engine, and that includes the audio system that is in Unreal. So it has a visual scripting system called Blueprints, which can be used for actually creating the game. So traditionally you would have to program a game. Visual scripting is programming, but using little pictures and wires.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more like analog electronics or a modular synth.
Like modular, yeah. Okay.
That's basically how it works.
Can
and
sort of relate to that.
That's how I created a prototype of the interactive music system for Tethered, was to effectively do that kind of visual programming. And I got that to work. And then what's running in the game isn't what I prototyped. It is actually the people I worked with took my prototype and actually then coded it in C++, proper code. To make it run more efficiently.
Cool. So go into like technology, and you talked a little bit about like Pro Tools, DAWs. What sort of technology do you use when you're making music?
For music specifically, so my DAW is Nuendo. I mean, it might as well be Cubase in terms of music. The Nuendo's features that I use are probably more useful on the sound side of things in terms of post-production workflow and stuff like that. But it's basically Cubendo, and I use a mixture of real instruments. Because you're in my room now, I've got stuff around.
I can confirm there are instruments.
There are instruments in this room, and virtual instruments as well, both synths. And when I'm using synths, it tends to be virtual synths rather, because I've got a little modular synth, but I tend not to use that. So it's interesting. So like sound, I charge a daily rate. Music is generally per minute finished music. So the more time I spend in it, it's interesting, because I want it to be good, but the more time I spend in it, effectively the less money I'm making.
Yeah.
So, which is I would always veer towards it being good than me like trying to like, hey, who cares how much you got paid if it's rubbish? Do you know what I mean? So, but at the same time, like I can't. So I've been writing music recently, and I've been spending. They're effectively tracks. These are like 3-minute tracks, very traditional in terms of their poppy like structure. And I've spent about 7 days on the first couple. Partly because it's the first tracks I've written for the project, so there's more back and forth with the client to get it to be what they want, because I'm still working out what they want, they're still working out what they want, so it takes a little bit longer to get started in the project than it does once you're actually knee deep in it, because hopefully at that point you know what you're doing and it's a little bit quicker.
What was I going to say? Brief. So like you were talking about getting a brief for a thing.
It's either been, for me, I've worked with an audio director who's knows what they want, or I've worked with someone who's just asked me what do I think to start the conversation. Maybe because they don't feel comfortable saying here's what you should do, because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about, so they'd rather I kick things off than they like do. And that's the difference between an audio director and someone who's not got that experience. Is the audio director does know what they're talking about, so they do have the confidence to kick the conversation off, and it's still a conversation. Like if I disagreed strongly, I could still say, are you sure? Or you can do that thing where you do what they've asked, but then you also do what you think is right and present them with both, so that they will
hopefully see the right one.
And the thing is, you could be wrong, because you in writing it, you might be like, shit, they were right. I'll not give them my idea because it was a rubbish idea. So it's good to test your assumptions that way. I think that there's an interesting aspect of game repetition, which is part of that thing too, where it's hard for me to know, like, how good is my music? Is it just because people have heard it a lot that they like it? Because I believe that that's a phenomenon. Like, I think you can like anything.
It's like Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? You have. I'm not saying your music is like that. That's terrible.
Abusive music.
But there's a thing, if people are taken hostage, eventually they like their like desensitization.
Yeah. Well, it's like putting up with travelling on the tube in London.
To music.
Like,
by the way, that was a bad
humans
example.
can put up with anything. Like, you really can. It's all relative to what you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know, is any music actually any good? Or is it just that we're exposed to it a lot? Like, I think that's a genuine...
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like,
sort of philosophical thing is like, is any music good? Or is it just that... or maybe, like, the fact that pop music is repetitious and that is the most popular says something about that. And just because music isn't intrinsically repetitive in its natural forms doesn't mean it's not repetitive by the fact that people are choosing to listen to that particular genre over and over and over. And it's through their exposure to it that they become fond of it.
Yes.
And so that the concept of anything being good starts to go out the window a little bit.
Yeah, because you get a bit warped and your little path becomes a bit more narrow, doesn't it? And you start walking down that path.
Yeah. And that's why there are niches. I guess it was talking about Madonna, brought that up as well. If you're talking about William Orbit, then she's enough of a draw that there are millions of people who would buy her music irrespective of what it is. If it was bad, they wouldn't buy it again. So there's like, once you reach that level of like stardom, you've got to like maintain a certain amount of like credibility in your music, otherwise you lose your fans. But as long as you can just like hit enough, sorted. If you're a young composer or wannabe composer and you're like, right, I want to work and write music for games, there's a bunch of other people that want to do that too. So the issue isn't about how do you do that. It's a chicken and egg situation. How do you get to work in the game when people want confidence that you know what you're doing, but you've never done it before, so clearly they don't have any confidence in you. It's a really slow war of whatever the opposite of attrition is. A war of attraction.
That's right.
Where you need to just, every bit of experience you gain slowly adds a little bit more to your credibility. And obviously you need to start at the bottom of the ladder. You need to be working with people who also don't have any experience. That's why you're working together, because no one would hire them either. And then so you can work on some amateur projects. This is the thing, you can't wait for the world to find you. It's not going to happen. And you need to get out there, and basically, if you want to make music for games, just do it. Now, obviously, you're not going to get paid to do it to start with, but you can't, like, you need to make your own opportunities.
Yeah, I think there's enough people making indie games. I mean, I use a software called Renoise, DAW called Renoise, which is a tracker.
Yep.
And even there's people on those forums that say, I make computer games, I'm looking for someone to make music, I'm not going to give you any money, but, just give me your music. Yeah, I think those opportunities are, they are there.
So if you can find those, then eventually you'll get a bunch of things. One is you'll get a portfolio, so you can have the work that you've done for games on your website. See, quite a lot of people who are composers, who are experienced composers, either just because they've written a lot of music, and you can listen to someone's music and be like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, like, and I can imagine that in a game. But they've not actually worked in a game yet, and they've not worked in a film yet, even if they aspire to do that. Just because you are good at writing music doesn't actually mean you've got the ability to write music for an experience, because those aren't the same skills. So the ability to write music for music's sake, even if it's really good music, isn't the same skill as the ability to write music for an experience. And so until you've actually got that, you shouldn't make the assumption you can do it either. Like, wanting to do it and being able to do it aren't the same thing. So at that point, I would say to someone who's at the beginning of their career, you need to get that experience. It's not just so you can then get a paid gig. It's actually so you can learn how to do it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're doing, and you will make mistakes, and that will also make you unattractive. It's only you get to a point where you've done it and you're doing good work and people like your work, and at that point that will just get you more, possibly no low paid work. The thing that will start to really open doors for you is once your lottery ticket comes up and that project you worked on that you didn't think was going to go anywhere ends up being a little bit successful. Ideally, it's, ideally like a world phenomenon, but like,
yeah.
Be realistic. Even a game that is just like that people have heard of, if you work to something people have heard of, all of a sudden when they're looking at whatever means they are reading about you, or they meet you and you say what you've worked on, they go, oh, I played that. All of a sudden they're viewing you. You're not just like part of the what I would call the composer plague.
That's quite strange, isn't it?
If you think of any of your online interactions, you should think of that in the same way as you would a conversation. And like, don't put something in an email to someone that you wouldn't have put just if you met someone at a party. Like, your icebreaker should be the same at the party as it would be in your email.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't email someone with party chat, so don't email someone. It's basically like, it's difficult. It is difficult because people are so desperate to make contacts, make work, but you should really put your focus on meeting people in person and get out there and meet people that way, rather than I think social media as well, it's like it's quite a lot of hot air. I don't think, I mean, we met through social media, so it's like, but in order to have a real life interaction, so it's like I think that is the right way to do it.
I think you're right as well in terms of like, in the early days, you take whatever gig you can get for no money, working with people who are as low skilled as you are, in order to learn those things. I think that's such an important piece of advice. And don't expect to get really high very quickly. Hard work goes a long way. And
then eventually, if you're lucky, this is the other thing. Like, there's so much luck involved. Like, there's luck involved in my career. I've been really, really, really lucky, and people talk about making their own luck, and that's true. You need to. When you find yourself in a position where there's something you can take advantage of, you need to be ready to take advantage of it. And so that bit's on you, the being ready bit's on you, but you're not in charge of those random things. Be that me, playing in the Prokofiev, Peter and the Wolf when I was a kid, wanting to learn to play the violin and the impact that had on my life and all the rest of it. It's like a snowball. You pick up work, you pick up contacts, and your networking is such a weird thing, because even now I don't think I really know what it is, but ultimately it is just the social side of things. It is meeting people. That's all networking is. It's meeting people, but doing it in a way that isn't being a dick. Basically.
Yeah, not enforcing yourself on people, I guess. Yeah. I want to ask you about your Game Sound website, because it sounds like a really, really great idea.
So it's an entirely voluntary organisation called Audio Mentoring, and just now it's focused on games. I think they'd like to sort of franchise it out to different industries at some point. And we've had interest. For example, there was a group of film sound women got in touch with Ariel Gross, who's the chap who started this thing, and said, we really love what you're doing, could we just like take it and like do our own thing with it. But basically it's kind of like a dating site for mentors and mentees. And so partly because I was talking about game music being 99.9% freelance gigs. Sound has generally been more of an in-house gig, but is increasingly freelance. And so it's not just sound, it's for game audio, so it's sound and music. But one thing that Ariel was aware of, and that we all felt like it was a one of the reasons why this is a good thing to take part in, other than just like helping people, is like a good thing. Karma points for that. Yeah. And it's something I've always been involved with and helping people, etc. So it's something that I'm passionate about. But specifically because like I got my break as a in-houser who's now gone freelance. I feel like because there are fewer in-house jobs now than there used to be, that as one of those people who benefited from that it's only right that we try and help people who are in that sort of chicken and egg freelancer trying to be a freelancer thing. And one of the ways is just to give people advice. So I mean, mentoring, it's not meant to be an educational course in how you make audio for games. It's really aimed at people who have already taken their first foray into games. They're probably no longer a student or coming towards the end of their studies. They've probably already made some games and done some game audio, because at that point they've already answered a lot of those really basic questions about what is interactive audio, how do you do it. There's a volunteer council that I'm a member of, and we basically are the ones who look at all the applications from mentees, of which there are hundreds, so we're a bit drowned at the moment, and then we also look at the application from mentors, and we we prove or deny that. And the main thing is like we've got a sort of a community guidelines which you have to accept before you sign up to this thing. That means that it's hopefully a safe place for anyone, and we want it to be. We're particularly aware that audio does have low representation of women, and that is something else that we feel like, particularly women mentoring women. Not exclusively, there's men mentoring women too, but I think that a lot of young women aspiring to work in game audio would benefit massively from having a role model that they can chat with, because in general, not just game audio, but in general, like women are up against the bias, the massive benefit that all men have just from having a penis. Yeah, that things generally go their way, particularly
music industries.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, really.
And so that's another thing, which is not, whilst that's not like an emphasis of what we're doing, it's something that we're very much aware of, and we think that it's a good thing to do. And there are women on the volunteer council, and there are the women mentors, and once we do that, it's really up to the mentor and the mentee what it is they're going to do. We have like a minimum commitment of, we need people to agree to have like either 2 hour like sort of Skype sessions or 4 1 hour, but basically over the course of a couple of months. I think it's important that the matching up process is done manually and that vetting people's applications is done manually, but in terms of the checking in with people, because we kind of follow up after a few months and say what are you up to and stuff, I think the robots could do that. So it's a little bit faffy, but
it's a great idea though.
Yeah,
it's a great idea of giving back to
so audiomentoring.com, that's what it's called.
Great, well thanks very much for talking to me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Oh, it was so good to catch up with Kenny and talk about computer games. It's definitely one of my biggest passions in life, aside from films and music, of course. Okay, next month it's going to be a artist I'm speaking to, who's a producer, still making music, who's signed to Ninja Tune Records. So look out for that next month, the beginning of December 2017. I am midierror. Thank you very much for listening. See you later.